The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we'll discuss Austin's last-minute 2-2 draw in Portland. We'll preview Austin's upcoming Open Cup match against New Mexico United. And we'll also be joined by MLS Season Pass's Steve Cangialosi to preview the FC Dallas match. My name is Landon Cottam, and I am not joined by Jeremiah Bentley today. Instead, I'm joined by a man who was followed by Anthony Precourt on Twitter for all of, like an hour, was it? It's Kevin Morris. Kevin, thanks for coming on the show again, man.
Hey, thanks so much. He followed me and didn't DM me even once. I was expecting to have some long, thoughtful conversations with him, but unfollowed and pretty much record time, I think, for anybody.
How long? Do you know how long it actually was?
I think it was. I don't know because I just checked and he unfollowed me. It was maybe 3 hours, I guess, between the follow and the check.
He is a man, so he keeps his the people he's following at 512,
right?
And so it means that like he thought you made the cut and then found someone else that bumped you.
Quickly realized
cold-blooded
mistake,
and then posted a tree rating like not long after that, which is a bit that Kevin has been trying to get started on Twitter, where he asked Anthony Precourt to rate a tree, and then he's done it several times, and then he unfollows you and then rates a tree on his own, unprompted. Disrespectful.
Unprompted, doesn't even ask my thought of the tree, like how I would rate it. I would have rated it pretty highly too. Different metrics, different, methods of evaluation, but you didn't ask. You just put out a tree rating.
Yeah.
Unfair.
Disrespectful. A lot of you guys will know Kevin from Twitter, if not from his other appearances on this show. But Jeremiah is, I think it's his wife's birthday, maybe, and so he's going to take the week off and spend some time with family.
I hope he's more certain than you are.
Yeah, let's hope so. Anyway, let's jump right into the Austin FC news. How about it? So let's start with some health updates. It's a pretty long segment. We'll try to go through these quickly, but there's quite a bit to get through. So starting with Diego Fagundes, Josh Wolff said in the media availability last week and then during the post-game press conference that they're hoping he's going to be back in a week or two. I don't know exactly what back means. I'm guessing that means like in full training again. Mm-hmm. So it's probably still several more games out of the match day roster, but it still seems like on the short end of what we were kind of afraid it was going to be. So that's encouraging. Radovanovic was not in the match day roster against Portland, which was surprising. In the post-game press conference, Josh Wolff said that he had fallen ill and like had some type of viral thing during the week and had to be dropped at the end of the week. Hoping he can maybe get back for US Open Cup, but who knows what kind of sickness he has and how quickly the recovery is going to be. I think the biggest one the biggest shock going into this Portland game was Sebastian Driussi not included in the match day 20 against Portland. And so we find out, I guess we're dropping hints. The broadcasters were.
I think it was like 40 seconds into the broadcast. They're just like, oh yeah, by the way, Driussi out. What was it? 3 to 4 weeks, he said?
Well, so they apparently said that on the Spanish language broadcast. They explicitly said 3 to 4 weeks. On the English broadcast, I don't think they said anything. And then Josh Wolff was asked after the game, because obviously that's the first question they're going to ask, like, where's Driussi? And I don't know if he's lying, if they're trying to like keep it under wraps exactly how long, but he seemed to genuinely say, like, we honestly don't know. Like, we don't know how long it's going to be. We'll get back to Austin, get him checked out, see how long it's going to be. I don't know if that's genuine or not, but there is no official word on how long he's going to be out. Hopefully it's shorter rather than longer, but who knows?
Yes. Just completely up in the air with our best player going into a pretty tight series of matches.
Yeah. In better news, Sofyan Jeffal was back in the match day 20. He was out with, I think it was an ankle injury for a couple of weeks. So, and then Julio Cascante back in the starting 11 wearing the captain's armband. And we'll talk about his performance, but it was, that aside, it was good to see him back. And I think overall, good to see some of this depth coming back in to the team whenever we are facing this this really heavy slog of matches coming up, to have some more guys stepping back in, because we are still going to be missing some.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll get into we'll get into just how necessary that center back depth is in a minute, I think.
Yeah. So speaking of missing players, Owen Wolff, this is another bit of news dropped during the game day broadcast. Yes. But so we've been speculating that Owen Wolff would be on the U20 World Cup roster. That announcement has not been made. We're recording on Sunday night, so maybe we'll get an announcement on Monday. But as of Sunday night, there has been no official announcement from US Soccer saying which players are going to be on that roster. But Max Bretos and Brian Dunseth were saying on the broadcast that Owen Wolff is leaving this week right after the Portland game and is headed to Argentina to be with the U20 team. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at the dates of the U20 World Cup. And so it starts May 20th, which is still a couple of weeks from now, and then ends June 11th. And so I was thinking, like, it's just the U20 World Cup. He's a starter for an MLS team. Maybe he'll go a few days before the tournament starts. But for him to be leaving 2 weeks before the tournament starts was surprising to me. Am I off base there, or should we have expected that?
I think we should have expected it. I think the U20 World Cup especially is, it's not the World Cup, and certainly in terms of audience, it's nothing compared to the actual World Cup. But in terms of, I think, how seriously the youth federations take it, they need 2 weeks prep. I mean, this is the biggest tournament in the lives of some of these players, and it can really launch careers when players have big U20 World Cup tournaments. Trying to remember, was it the U? I think that was the U17 World Cup where Holland just burst. He scored like 7 goals in one game or something like that. The more time, the better for Owen Wolff, the worse for us, of course.
Yeah. I had some people asking me online, like, do we think Austin will actually release Owen Wolff? Because there was some talk among other MLS teams saying, I think Chicago were holding back a couple of guys, and a couple of other teams were saying, these guys are too important, we're not going to let them go. I never really thought that was going to be the case for Owen. I think partially because we can't, he's been an important player, but we have other guys at that position that can step in and do a job for us, or like maybe even be starting caliber at that spot. But also, I think Owen Wolff is poised to be Austin's first big sale. You'd have to think it's him or Danny Pereira at this point, right?
Yeah, and more likely to be Owen, I think, just because of his age. He could get bought by, say, like PSV, right? A really good kind of second-tier European team that's famous for development, and he's the right age for that. Danny's a little bit older, so Danny needs to go to a team that's kind of where he's just gonna play as a developed player. So that's a slightly harder transfer to make. But of course Austin's letting him go. I mean, honestly, it's based on how I just described these tournaments as being really big for youth players, it's kind of stupid. What are you developing young players for if you don't let them go play in the biggest showcase tournament in the world for those players? I mean, for us, in terms of like club finances, club reputation, if Owen goes and balls out at the tournament and helps get a big transfer fee as a result, that's great for the club, even if, for as many as 8 games we're shorthanded in midfield.
Yeah, we were doing the math before hitting record, and I was already a little bit worried when I thought it was going to be like 3 to 5 games, and it's going to be, depending on how far they go in the tournament, it looks like it's going to be 6 to 8 games that we're missing Owen. So we'll get into kind of how we think Josh Wolff is going to handle that when we get into the New Mexico United preview. We'll do that after we talk about the Portland match, but just quick details on when that match is going to be. So Austin FC is playing New Mexico United in the U.S. Open Cup this Wednesday at 8 p.m. You can watch it on the Bleacher Report football channel on YouTube, which I was struggling to find it during other rounds of the Open Cup. But if you just search Bleacher Report football, I think that channel should pop up, and then it's not hard to find after that. But yeah, I think Josh Wolff will be taking this tournament fairly seriously based on the context of how they've done in extracurricular competitions so far. But we'll get into more of that after the Timbers recap. Let's take a quick break before we get to that Timbers recap. So everyone hang tight. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back with that Timbers review. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC. FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. Moon Tower Soccer is also brought to you by Amplify Credit Union. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. Amplify's team lives and works in the community, making them the experts on how members can achieve their financial goals. What makes Amplify different? No bank fees. Amplify is the first financial institution in Texas to put an end to bank fees. Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower. All right, we are back. We're going to talk about Austin's 2-2 draw against the Portland Timbers. So Austin had to go to Portland, as we mentioned earlier, without Sebastian Driussi. And despite needing a last-minute equalizer to get that draw, I thought the performance was overall pretty encouraging. And I even thought that before that last goal.
Yes, I'm exactly the same. I was going to, I swear to God, even if we lost, I was going to say this was a good game, guys. It's one of those games where if you look at the goals that Portland scored against us, they're not really indicative of some kind of like structural collapse or something like that. They were both in their way kind of lucky. If you just look at the way that Austin played the game from start to finish, really, it was a pretty complete game from Austin. So this is one of those games where it just, over a season, if we play like this, we're going to be fine.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking that exact thing. If you play that exact game every game for the rest of the season, you get a result more times than not. And exactly. Oftentimes a win. And so, yeah, was it a dominant performance? No. Was it like the best performance we've ever seen? No. But it was good enough, and like taking some of those performances in that really rough patch. If we play those games over and over, we never win.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's in the stats for those games too. I mean, the stats in those games, the expected goals were low, the shots were low. This game, I think we had like 2 point something XG, which is right where we hit it in the score sheet. And I think Portland was a lot lower than that, because that second goal was, man, that was a lucky goal. So yeah, it's there in the stats. And it just, when I watching it, just felt like genuinely I was having fun watching us play. Things were working, things were clicking.
Yeah. So before we get into those goals, let's talk about how Austin's set up. So when we saw this starting 11 come out, you'd start, like, Austin usually just releases like a list. And so I'm sure you were doing the same thing, doing like, okay, putting together this puzzle. Who's going to play where? Who's going to do what? Were you thinking? There's two options. I thought Ring was going to be in a back three, or Ring was going to play one of the dual eights and just kind of step in for Driussi's role in that 4-3-3 look. Which did you like think one was more likely than the other?
Yeah, I jumped right to back three. It seems like I really think that Josh Wolff is moving the team to a back three as like the standard formation. And I think Cascante coming back almost guaranteed that was going to happen his first game back. I think that is the way that Wolff wants to play. And the thing is that Ring with two center backs in a back three is much better in a back three than Ring with one other center back and one other converted fullback into center back. So yeah, that's what I was expecting. But yeah, the lineup comes out and just frantically trying to figure it out on my phone, looking at the list of players to understand what the hell we're doing.
Yeah, so what it ended up looking like was I'd say like the defensive shape was kind of like a 5-2-3. And so that's with John Gallagher, a right wing back, Adam Lundqvist at left wing back, and then from right to left, the center backs were Ring, Cascante, Väisänen, and you had Pereira and Owen Wolff as the central midfielders, Jussi Zardes as your striker, and then Rodney Redes on the right, Rigoni on the left, but playing not as the width providers, but as kind of those tucked in wingers, almost playing more as attacking midfielders. And yes. So the defensive shape was very much five at the back. Like those guys were dropping back and playing as fullbacks pretty much. But then as we transitioned into the attacking shape, it was that 3-2-2-3 that we've seen Wolff trying to make happen from the beginning of the season. Mm-hmm. And it was just, they were doing it a little bit differently instead of like kind of shifting the whole team, like rotating them clockwise, everybody one to the left. And it was, okay, we're just going to like two wing backs, those two wing backs push up high and overlap. The wingers drop inside, and then the three center backs keep being center backs. And so,
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what we saw was this formation really, truly working for the first time. And I think it's what you touched on, which was Lundqvist and Gallagher playing those wingback roles and playing in a really committed to the position way, where they towed the touchline the entire game. And what that did was create a lot of space in the middle, where Rigoni and Redes in these kind of we can call them inverted winger roles, but I do think like you can also just think of it as like these paired attacking midfielders, like you said.
They never really played like a winger.
Right, never. They're always in the middle, and they're always in that channel. If you have the three center backs, right, in the back, if you have the ball at the feet of Väisänen on the left and Ring on the right, there's a direct channel straight up the field, and that channel goes right to Redes and Rigoni. And so that's why the two wingbacks are so far. And Rigoni and Redes would come back and check into that space and build plays by pinging back to the center backs or pinging back to the overlapping wingback. It was just all the space was being used. And it was really nice to see players moving into places where they needed to be, where they were supposed to be. Previously, in other iterations of this lineup, it just seemed like we had players that they just didn't suit the role quite right. Like Jean as a left center back, just didn't work. And there was this weird rotation thing with Danny that he would have to do to go up the field. And Fagundes really struggled in that inverted winger role. He didn't really like playing so centrally, but this time we had full commitment from everybody, including Rigoni, and also including Redis, who was freaking great in that role. He was really good there. It was awesome to see. It was cool, and especially it was just great to see him play in a really tactically smart way. Like for a young player that struggled, his performance against Portland wasn't just like flashes of like crazy talent. It was doing the little things right, lots of really little things. So that's, to me, that was what was most encouraging about that performance. Anyway, I'm really digressing. We were just talking about the lineup, and I'm
no, that's where I wanted to go with it. Was this like execution against a role? I think that's because, like we said, it's not like the final shape is exactly what we were doing a few weeks ago. That was not working at all. Right. And I think the simplicity of it is part of what made it work this time. Instead of that, all of the mental math having to do, like, okay, in this phase of play, am I a fullback or am I a winger? In this phase of play, am I a winger? Am I an attacking midfielder? Am I a center back? Like all these guys kind of doing two things. In this one, everyone was playing more or less the same role all the time. And so you can use like that mental space to do that. Like the offense to defense to offensive transition mechanism was just a much simpler machine now. And so it's a little bit automatic. Yeah. And then in those moments where it's like, okay, it's time to just play soccer, they could just do that. And Rodney Redes and Rigoni could move into spaces, and you could, okay, Rigoni pulls wide, here's an underlap. Like those things were just there to do because these guys weren't thinking about all this other stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the only kind of complicated thing that I remember seeing was Danny still dropping back into the back three. And actually, when we would build occasionally down the lines, Danny would drop back, and we'd almost look like we have a back four.
Yeah.
And Ring would push up, and it was to give that same kind of numbers overload down whatever side we were doing that we have when we do have a back four, when we have just two center backs and a full back going up.
Yeah, it essentially like turns into the 4-3-3 shape that we would have seen last year.
Exactly.
But with Danny Pereira as your left center back.
Right. And he wasn't doing it every time. I think it was a very context-based decision. I think he would drop back if it looked like we were going to really build directly down that line. And he would also do it when we build down the left side too, but Väisänen didn't really charge forward quite as much as Ring did, but he still cheated a little bit, and it was the same thing. It was all just about building numbers on that side of the field, because if you remember in games that earlier this season when we're building with that back three, and we tried to go down the lines, there would just be these huge empty gaps in the middle of the field because we'd have Owen and Danny staying too deep. We'd basically have a winger and an inverted winger trying to beat three people down the line. Usually, yeah, didn't work so well. So yeah, that was a little twist that Wolff had Danny do, and it worked really well. And it was kind of the one thing, like you said, everybody else was just kind of they had really specific zones and roles that of the field that they're rotating in and out of, and nothing too complex.
I also quite liked the defensive structure in this shape. Having those, like that back five, it allowed those wing backs to push up higher on wide players when needed. Because when they did that, they weren't leaving that back line out to dry. There's still numbers back there. Danny Pereira would follow runners into the box at times. And so you could afford to be aggressive out wide without leaving everyone else out to dry. We'd also see Alex Ring and sometimes Leo Väisänen kind of charge up, step up in between lines to mark attacking midfielders or guys kind of like floating in those in between lines there. And again, you can do that without hanging everyone else out to dry. And so you'd also see balls get played into the corner. Center back can run out wide and help. Because, like, say the wing back pushes up, the ball gets played over their head, the center back can go. You still have two, we'll say quote unquote real center backs. We'll count Ring as a center back at the moment, but you're not like, if Väisänen steps and he's leaving John Kolmanich and Nick Lima in there to defend across. Like, that's a problem.
Exactly. This playing with three center backs works best when you have three center backs.
Yeah.
I think I know that's like a revelation, but I think that you need those center backs the way that Josh Wolff wants to play to be, special kinds of center backs. I think that's why Cascante, despite defensively being questionable sometimes, we could see last night why he is so valuable for the team to play the way we needed to play it. And the thing is, it's interesting. We have never really seen Cascante in a back three for very long. So it's possible that the back three also helps cover for some of his defensive issues and how he can easily be exposed. So it'll be really interesting to see as the season unfolds how he performs defensively in that structure. Because I mean, I've been critical of the back three structure because it didn't suit what we were working with. And I think Josh Wolff realized that and switched to the back four eventually, as long as Cascante was injured. But I can't say I've seen enough of this team play to in a back three with actual center backs to say that it doesn't work at all for the team.
Yeah.
Based on Saturday, it looked really good.
And when you have guys like Cascante and Vicen who play the ball so well, like it's not necessarily a defensive move to play back three. Like, those guys are offensive weapons. And then from what I've seen of Radovanovic, I don't think he's as good on the ball, but I think he's going to be above average for MLS center backs on the ball. And so if above average is your worst ball playing center back and you're playing those three guys back there at some point, like I like how that feels.
Yeah, it's very possible that Radovanovic also plays in that central position, with a lot of the distribution being handled by the two guys to his right and left, and those bigger line breaking direct passes, vertical passes, and the big switches are left to Cascante and Vicen and not Radovanovic.
Yeah, I think that also makes sense. And I kind of feel like Radovanovic is probably going to be our most athletic center back of those three as well. So having him as the deeper guy to kind of clean up any messes, or to the guy, if you have to be sprinting towards your own goal to make a hero play, like, you'd want it to be the fastest one of them.
Yeah. I can't say I watched a lot of his clips, but he did his highlight video on YouTube included a lot of last ditch slide tackles.
Yeah.
That's what I know about him.
Austin, for the most part, did a pretty good job of forcing Evander to drop deep to receive the ball. Every time he touched the ball, though, something dangerous happened. And so their first goal comes in the 33rd minute. It starts with a deep free kick that Evander takes. I think we clear the first one, then it gets kind of bounced back into the box, falls into a really precarious spot in the box with lots of legs running around. Cascante is able to clear it back, and Evander collects it more or less where the original free kick happens. He takes a few dribbles inside and is able to get a cross off, a really nice cross to the back post. Lundqvist is on that far side, doesn't mark Zuparic tight enough, and 6'3" beats 5'8" every time in that scenario, right? So, like, he was always going to be at a disadvantage. I do think Lundqvist his footwork was bad. He was kind of like backpedaling into it and didn't really get a proper challenge in on it, but he was always going to be at a disadvantage in that one either way.
Yeah, that's also one of those plays where, that cross a little higher, a little lower, his Lundqvist's footwork, you're not going to notice, right? I think the reason why the goal doesn't bother me that much is just, it was like a perfect cross, hit to a player with the height advantage over the other guy. So, it's just kind of like bad luck, Evander hit that perfect ball on that play to that player, and it happens sometimes. Again, like I said at the start. Oh,
I was just gonna say, not to say that they couldn't have done things better in that sequence, but most of the time you don't get punished like that for it.
Exactly. Yeah. and it's not, again, it's not like a systemic issue. It was just people are going to be able to hit crosses from that position on the field, and a guy like Evander is more likely going to be able to hit a really, really good one. So that goal just it doesn't bother me that much.
And it was extra frustrating too, because I feel like Austin had kind of a stretch of sustained momentum going their way. Like, it wasn't heavy field tilt, but it was tilted towards Austin in that moment.
Definitely.
And then you get this essentially a set piece goal. You give that up going into the half.
It felt like something we're used to this season, you know?
Yeah.
Actually, last season too. Just giving up an early goal.
Going to halftime, Austin ends up pulling level in the 60th minute with a John Gallagher header. So this one starts off with Cascante collects an errant pass at the back. They try to play a little flicked on through ball, and it just falls to Cascante. Plays it forward to Redes quickly. Redes turns, runs at the back line, lays it off sideways to Wolff. Wolff takes one more touch forward and makes Luis Mabiala, was the center back, kind of tracking there. That one touch makes Mabiala commit to kind of sticking inside and fending Wolff off one more step. And then Wolff just kind of plays it in behind to Rigoni. Rigoni plays it first time, left-footed cross to the back post that finds Gallagher's head. Really nice cross, I thought. And then cross. a good run, and Gallagher was calling for it. You see his hand go up, like right here. Play it right there. Yeah. Rigoni hits him right on a dime, and Austin ties it up 1-1. But this was an encouraging goal to me, because it's that kind of transition play that you so often see. That ball, that Cascante wins that first ball, plays it forward, and then whoever that is in Redes's position at that moment doesn't see an immediate option and just recycles it back and waits for everyone to get reset. He didn't do that. He turns and just goes like, let's go make something happen while we have them. And I feel like this Austin FC team far too often gives up on chances like that in favor of trying to set up a more possession-based attack.
Yes, and it's all about speed, right? Especially the way that they want to create chances. It's super cross dependent, and so for those crosses to find an Austin player, it's easier if that line is not set, right? If players are out of sorts, there's just better space. There's better space to move into. So Cascante getting that ball out quickly, Redes moving quickly, all of it set up Gallagher on the far post being wide open, because nobody had caught him yet. In another game, we slow that down. By the time Gallagher is there, we miss the cross, the team gets set, we recycle possession, and we try to hit a cross into a box packed with like 5 defenders. So that being quick and decisive in transition was everything on that play. One interesting thing, I don't know if you noticed, but actually Gallagher was wide open when Redes received the ball initially.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
You could easily argue that was the better pass, because he's just bursting into space with nobody between him and the penalty area. But it worked out in the end, because again, the Redes to Owen to Rigoni, that was all fast. So we still got it in time to catch Gallagher's run.
Yeah, and you talk about catching them out of sorts. Oftentimes when Gallagher would receive the ball wide or would like get one of those balls over the top, it would be Santi Moreno tracking back to defend him, who was there like more or less like they moved around a lot, but like the left winger, more or less like attacking midfielder over there. He was often the one tracking back. And so when they lose the ball as they're trying to play like a line splitting pass, Moreno's not back there. And so take advantage of that space. And they did it, and we got rewarded for it. So I really hope that Wolff gets these guys to do that more often, because it did not seem like it was the guys' instinct to do that, but more something that they had been coached to do or not to do more so.
I mean, I think we're playing this 3-back line partially to be able to pass out of pressure, right? And Portland was, it was like just a perfect test for this because Portland was putting a fair bit of pressure, but they're not really a pressing team. There are very few pure pressing teams in the league, right? So this game was a really good test to just see how we do against, like, let's just say an average to okay or good MLS pressing team. And they did great. And what happened was that when we broke out of their press, there was a lot of space to run into. And we exploited it really well, and we moved the ball really fast and got lots of opportunities as a result. We think of Portland as a team that sits back, but they put a lot of pressure on from time to time throughout the game. They tried, and we did great for once.
So Portland scores again. I'd say against the run of play again to make it 2-1. Yes. This one starts with a quick throw in, leads to them finding Evander just inside the box. They've already seen many times how dangerous that guy is. And so he draws in, I think, four people all trying to kind of close him down. He's able to retreat and kind of get out of that little group, finds Claudio Bravo on the other side of the box. Bravo winds up to shoot and sneaks one in the into the far post from, I don't know, 30 yards out. And it kind of seems like maybe Stuver saw it a little bit late, because you'd normally bet on him to make that save. Is there anything else you see there? Like, do you think, I know like Brian Dunseth was saying that he thought Ring maybe should have done better there. That feels a little bit, I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot he could have done different. Maybe Redes could have closed him down a little bit quicker.
Yeah. Definitely. You can always shut down a guy a little bit faster, right? Like, unless you're full sprint getting there, you can probably always shut him down a little bit faster. But the thing is that it wasn't, given where like all the bodies in the box, and everything about his positioning there, it wasn't, as a defender, like, it's not a high percentage chance, right? Like, you're just kind of trying to shepherd him to make another decision. So I don't know. I think that really what happened there was Stuver just got screened. I think most of the time that ball is not hit that low. I think it's hit high. I think most of the time it probably deflects off of a player because there were so many bodies in the way. But we just got unlucky. I think the XG for that was like 0.04 on that shot. So when you have numbers like that, I mean, I have a long history with XG, and talking about it on the internet. But there is value in the stat. And one thing it tells us is that most of the time a goal is not scored from that context, right? That situation. So it's just hard to get mad at a defender for not doing something marginally better on that play.
One thing I will mention on this play, only because it seemed like a bit of a trend that almost got us into trouble earlier, is on this quick throw in, the whole team was like a little bit slow to react to it. Like, there's a couple of players on the field that didn't know the ball was in play until like a couple of steps afterwards. And I think there was, like, really late after we had already equalized, there was a quick corner or something like that happened, and there were guys not paying attention. And so, like, that is a concerning trend. I don't know if they're used to defending like our own guys doing those long throws where we treat them like set pieces and like, okay, it's throw in, we have some time. But like, I would like to see a bit more urgency in those moments, especially in the late ones, whenever it's 2-2 and we're trying to defend this draw.
Yeah, I never have any explanation for how that happens with a team of professional players. It's kind of hard to understand how they can't be kind of on at all times in a 90-minute game. But then again, it's far beyond my personal experience to have played in a truly professional soccer game. So it's hard to judge or understand exactly what's going on in those moments. But I agree. Maybe it's something to do with being on the road. I don't know. Just late game in Portland on the road, tired and just kind of phasing out for a millisecond.
Yeah, that Portland altitude getting to him. So Portland regained momentum for, I think, the last 5 minutes of regulation. It seemed to be mostly them. Bruin, Urruti, and Finley all come on in the 84th minute. And then in the 92nd minute or so, it was what looked like not a particularly dangerous feeling sequence. Owen Wolff ends up with the ball on the right touch line, puts his head up, sees a couple of guys in the box, and just launches a cross in. It ends up being, I think, like the idea was hopeful, but the execution was quite good. It was a really good cross.
It was like a thing of beauty, that ball.
It was one of like a keeper freezer, where like the keeper could not come off because it was too high and like the curve was too good. And then Bruin just beats, was it Mabiel? I don't remember who he beats into the box, but Bruin's run, he gets onto the other end of the cross. Do you think that Bruin was trying to head the ball the other direction?
No, I don't know. I didn't notice that.
He does one of these, like one of those head motions where you're like trying to put like an angle on it, like he's trying to go far post. And he does that head motion, but then heads it down near post. And I kind of think he mishit it.
That's extremely possible. Or maybe Will Bruin is such an elite striker. You know, a lot of the best strikers, they fake the keeper out with their eyes.
That's right.
You know, like they look at one corner, they shoot to the other. And maybe Will Bruin is that good with how he swings his head around on headers.
I saw some folks online like who were in Portland at the game talking about how they had talked to some Portland fans afterwards and said that like some of the Portland people they were like upset to not win the game, but even more upset that it was Will Bruin who did it, just because he had done that so many times when he was playing for Seattle against them. And you could see him in Gio Savarese, Portland's coach, talking after the game, and it kind of seemed like that was the exchange going on there, like a friendly little exchange saying like, "Not you again."
I heard him getting booed when he came on. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right. I think you're right. So tied it up 2-2. Like I said, there's a couple of late chances that could have broken bad for us, but Austin able to hang on. So Will Bruin has scored a goal now. He should be the starter now, right, Kevin?
Absolutely not. We got to do better with our with how we evaluate players than thinking, you know, just using somebody's previous 5 minutes to judge whether they should be a starter or not. Yeah.
I think Bruin has like gone on the record saying like, I can't start.
He's literally said he can play 40 to 60 minutes. He's doing exactly what that play is exactly what he's here for. He's not a guy that's you're going to build an attack around. He's the guy you bring in so Owen Wolff can put in a hopeful and ultimately perfect cross for Will Bruin to get on the end of and, you know, knock home. He's 33 years old. He's not going to be starting for us. And let's remember what happened the last time a striker scored a single goal and everybody demanded that he start regularly. Maxi Urruti hasn't done a thing since. He started every game. Just one goal doesn't mean you're on a hot streak. It means he scored one goal. So I think you have to evaluate the rest of a guy's play. And let's be honest, Zardes played really good. Like he did it again. Like he played really well within the structure and just didn't get on the scoreboard. The first goal, like I think that ball could have been intended for him, but he's really close to it. You know, it could have been his goal. Gallagher just ended up being a more open guy. But yeah, Zardes played great. Let's not bench Zardes because he didn't score.
Yeah, Zardes, I think positionally, his movement, some really good like target and like link up play as well. Some really good moments there. I would
remember the play towards in the second half where he held up the ball in the box and pinged it back to Rigoni. At the top of the box, Rigoni didn't get a great shot off. That happens, but that's a great hold up play.
Yeah, I will say if a ball was not played directly to him, then he was not going to get to it, which was like he looked very slow at times, and like a ball would trickle out, or like a back heel or like a pass would be just a little bit off, and he just was never going to get to it, which is, I think, like that's the thing. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, like he gets to those, and he's fast enough to do that, and he just looks like he's lost it, which is pretty discouraging.
Yeah, I think he's 31, right? Isn't he?
I think
30?
so. Yeah, I think that's right.
You know, I mean, I think people, it just hits you at different times. So people start aging out at different times, and I think that we can literally see it with Zardes, that he's aging out a little bit. There was also a cross. There's this great bit of possession build up, fast build up, that found Lundqvist wide in the first half, and Lundqvist hit a great cross into the box. And Zardes was,
Was it the one on the ground
behind it? Mm-hmm. It got cleared. The defender got there first, and you just imagine
it's one of those, like, if he had the speed to like get 1 foot on the other side of that defender, then that's exactly a play we can take advantage of a lot. But if he's not going to be fast enough to get to those, then service has to be perfect every time.
Yeah, and that's the frustration. That's the totally legitimate frustration with Zardes. I don't know that Rudy does anything more positionally than Zardes does, and he certainly isn't scoring that many more goals than Zardes. So I think, especially when we play in this formation, Zardes is probably the best guy, not Will Bruin. Will Bruin is the guy you bring on, as we said, to do exactly what he just did on Saturday. He's good at that.
Let's go through a couple of other individual performances. So quick thoughts on Rigoni.
Best game for Austin FC ever for Rigoni, I think.
I agree with that.
Man, he was, the thing is, he was just like dripping with confidence. It's like he scored a goal, and like you could see it was like a button got pressed. He's taking people on. He's running so much. He's all over the place in his part of the field. Positionally, he played it really smart. He checked back into those pockets like we were talking about, win the ball, distribute the ball, burst down the field. Great cross for the score. And man, or for the first goal. And I just think if he, whatever, that first goal drug that he's on, that high, I just hope it keeps going. Because you have talked, I don't think I've been on the show. I've talked on Twitter, you've talked on the show about how early in the season, like a lot of those games where he got a lot of criticism for missing chances, he played in a technical and tactical standpoint. He actually played really well in those games. Not dominant in any way, but one of the more dangerous players for Austin. So adding confidence to that is really exciting. He's always been a streaky player. Who knows what's going to happen? But man, I was really happy with his performance last night.
Yeah, the same thing with Rodney. Like, two guys playing confidently, not just like, you think of confidence as being like, I'm going to take a guy on, but confidence also like knowing your role, knowing your position. And those two guys knew exactly where they were supposed to be, and because of that, I think we're playing more confidently on the ball. And so, yeah, I don't know where this Rodney came from, but he was also really good at that. Quickly on Julio Cascante, I thought Julio was really good, and surprisingly so for not having played in however long.
He was awesome. I've been critical of him defensively, but like I said earlier, I think in this 3 center back structure, it probably really suits him, and it allows his best qualities to shine. He's so good. Julio Cascante, I think, is elite in the league as a distributing center back for his passing. With the ball at his feet, he's just really freaking good at it. He could play a different position on the field if he was not, so tall and gangly and slow.
And then the last one I wanted to bring up, you can bring up someone else if you like to, but Danny Pereira. I think this is Aside from a couple of little mistakes, I think this is one of the more complete games that I've ever seen Danny Pereira play.
I think he is getting so good that it's almost like we're starting to not notice him. He was just running that midfield, and he was the thing with him in this game too is it wasn't just classic Danny stuff like Danny on the half turn bursting down the field on a dribble. He was doing lots of little things really, really well, and he was hitting those crossfield balls as well. Yeah. He's starting to become a better distributor of the ball, which ultimately, I think, for the team and for Danny's career as a soccer player, is more important than highlight reel runs down the field, because a team is going to play better when the team is going to move faster as a team when the ball is in the air and not at his feet. So it's just great to see him starting to develop more skills. This is the thing about Danny too. Like every season he gets better. Every half season he gets better. Like we can still see progression in his game.
Yeah, and on top of that, you see his back pressing, his defensive work. He's gotten, I think, more physically able at those kinds of things, and that's a testament to the work that he's put in training and just like preparing his body for it, but also the mental part of it and just knowing where to be, reacting quicker, the mental toughness to make those hard defensive runs whenever it's late in the game and you've been doing it the whole time. So I mean, if he continues on this trajectory, like Danny Pereira in a year will either not be in America anymore or be one of the best midfielders in the league.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts on the Portland game before we move on?
I think we've drilled down into it enough. Let's move on to New Mexico United.
Okay, so looking at like the guys available, the performances that we just saw in this Portland game, like who do we think Josh Wolff runs out against New Mexico United? I kind of mentioned earlier that I think Wolff will take this competition seriously, and I think there's going to have to be some rotation, but I think he'll want to win this for having lost in the Open Cup last year, having crashed out of CCL early this year. Like I think they'll want to do well and go a couple of rounds in this one.
Yeah, it's also like it's a weird game from that perspective though, because our game the next Saturday is against Dallas, right?
Yeah.
So of course that's a game that we have to win. And we don't have that much depth right now because of all of our injuries. So what will we do? It is very tricky. Owen's going to be out. So we're going to need Ring or Jeffal to play midfield. So that's where the center back depth from all the way at the beginning of the show that I was talking about is probably really going to have to be tested. It's very possible that Radovanovic gets a start. If he's healthy. If he's healthy, if he doesn't, it's possible it's Kip Keller. Because like I really don't think he's going to start Jeffal in this game. I think it's got to be Ring in the midfield. Maybe I always do this. I guess it could be Valencia too. I always forget about Valencia just because I don't love Valencia. But yeah, it could also be Valencia. But I think it's time to kind of push Ring back into midfield and test that center back depth because I mean, even if he's not playing midfield, he's going to have to rest at some point because again, Dallas is on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it would be very, very good if Radovanovic is healthy. So let's hope that he is, that the whatever he had is gone and he's been able to recover and play at least most of a game on Wednesday. Because yeah, like you said, we need it right now.
It is also just an easy game, relatively speaking, for him to make his intro as a starter. It's slightly weaker competition than MLS competition, and it's at home. It's a guy that played in the Jupiler League, should be able to handle USL. So it'd be a great opportunity for Josh to give him some minutes.
Yeah, I'm also talking about center backs. I'm curious about, like, Kip Keller's been making match day squads, but only on the games where the second team is playing the day after the first team. and then still not getting on the field. And so I think, I don't know how much of the second team you've been watching, but I think there's like a good argument to be made that Kip Keller's not the best center back on that team. But he's the one with the first team contract that is very easy to put on the bench when you need to. And so
that's definitely a whole other conversation, but I agree that is a conversation that could be had.
And then forwards, like, do we run out that same front three? Do we play Maxi because Zardes went so deep into this game? And then like, I'm guessing you play Rigoni, but then do you sit like, are we saving Rodney Redes for FC Dallas, or do you run him out in this one too?
Who do you play in their places, right?
Like, yeah, I mean,
I think it's got to be Rigoni and Redes. Yeah, I think both of them are playing. Probably Maxi up top, I would guess. I think certainly, I find it really unlikely that we would start Zardes 3 straight games in like 3 to 4 days rest in between them. And I think Zardes is going to start on Saturday against Dallas. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some fullback changes, probably like Nick Lima over Gallagher. Maybe Lundqvist will be out there again. That wouldn't be super surprising to see him. He hasn't had a ton of minutes this season, so he could probably handle a 3-game load.
Looking at New Mexico United, I know you got to watch a little bit of them. I watched their Open Cup match and then their league match following that against Orange County. But this is a team they started playing in 2019. And in that season, their inaugural season, they beat the Rapids and FC Dallas in the Open Cup before losing to Minnesota in the quarterfinals. So they have a history of giant killing in this tournament. Currently, and they are a team who's the last few years have been towards the top of the USL Western table.
I remember that run. I remember rooting for them because they've got really good fans out there. Yeah, they're one of those USL teams that's just got this really great support.
They're currently not doing so hot in the league. They were close to the bottom of the table as of a couple of weeks ago. I think they beat Orange County and then drew at RGV. Mm-hmm. And then so in the Open Cup, they ended up beating Phoenix Rising 2-1 at home, partially thanks to a red card that happened in like the 42nd minute or something. So they were playing a man up for most of the game. I think their best players I'll go through a few of those guys, but number 43 is Justin Portillo. He's their 6th. They kind of, if they're playing through the midfield, he's kind of the guy they're gonna go through. They also have Spanish left winger named Santi Moar. He's a USL veteran. I think he's like 29 and has mostly played in USL, but he's kind of their creative juice in the final third. Pretty shifty on the ball. He'll cut inside onto his right foot and either create chances for other people or to create a chance for himself. They've got a guy named Greg Hurst, number 17, who's a Scottish guy. He plays kind of like a second striker. He'll line up like more or less where a 10 would play, but he doesn't really play like a 10. He's more or less like a second striker running off of a bigger guy in front of him. But he scored, I think, 2 or 3 goals already this season. Finishes really well. Arrives in dangerous spots, and if the ball falls there, he can finish it. And then number 10 is a guy named Amando Moreno, who I think he's one of their like more creative attacking players, but is recovering from injury. So I'm not sure how much we're going to see him. After watching their Open Cup game, I was not super concerned about this team. I did not think they were very good. And I was like, okay, San Antonio is like one of the best USL teams. They can go toe-to-toe with some MLS teams, especially at home with that kind of motivation and energy. New Mexico didn't look like that kind of team. But then I watched their next league game against Orange County, and I was like, okay, maybe I was a little harsh on them because they looked like a proper good soccer team in that game.
Yeah, it's one of those, just any given day, you know. I mean, we already saw it this year with Violette. You know, we cannot be overconfident playing against teams from lesser leagues as we view them. I think, I hope at this point, this has really been hammered home to Josh Wolff and how he preps and speaks to his players before the game, and also to the players themselves, because it's 2 years in a row already, with really embarrassing cup knockouts. And we don't want it again. But like also we just said, there's a big game coming up in a few days after it. So it's going to be very, very interesting. I think theoretically, Josh really wants to take this game seriously, but the MLS season is where all the true pressure is on him right now.
Yeah. And we've got, like you said, we've got FC Dallas, and then we play Seattle away the following Wednesday. So some really tough games, some important games. Like if it's early in the season, but if we continue to never win a game in the league, it eventually starts to become a problem. And so
we just built up some good momentum from 2 good performances. No wins, but really good performances. We need a win, or else it's going to be a long summer.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where those tough decisions come too, is like you talk to your high performance folks monitoring player fitness and player performance and saying like, okay, I would love to play these guys in both of these games because that's what quote unquote taking it seriously looks like. But taking your season seriously also includes taking care of players. And if like I need this guy in a league game, maybe you're going to sacrifice this Open Cup game before, as far as like putting out the best team. You're going to make the cuts there, not against FC Dallas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other thoughts on Open Cup, Kevin?
No other big thoughts. I think that we're going to play our game against New Mexico. I think we are going to be super ball dominant. I think we're going to have a lot of possession. So it'll be really interesting to see how a slightly different lineup is able to build on what we saw against Portland. And I'm going to expect 3 center backs again, I think.
All right. Well, we will find out on Wednesday at 8 p.m. I think that's all for game reviews. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our interview with Steve Cangialosi. This has not happened yet. We're going to do that on Monday. Kevin and I are going to sign off tonight on Sunday, and we'll be back in a day / 45 seconds with that interview. Moontower Soccer is brought to you by Covert Auto Group. Covert Auto Group has been meeting the needs of local car buyers for 114 years because of their service, financial expertise, and support after the sale. In addition to supporting car buyers, Covert's an important part of the soccer community. If you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, be sure to check out covertauto.com. Moontower Soccer is also brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. Thanks to Sage Wilson Realty, we'll be giving away 2 tickets to an upcoming match, so fill out the form in the show notes for your chance to win. Again, this is made possible by Sage Wilson Realty, so if you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. You can check them out online at sagewilson.com. All right, we're thrilled to be joined by Steve Cangialosi. Steve, you spent 20 plus years calling Red Bulls / Metro Stars games. Is that right?
Yeah, I deserve a medal spending most of the last 2 decades with Shep Messing in the booth calling Red Bulls games. But yes, it was a labor of love, and we enter this new chapter this year with Apple TV and MLS Season Pass, and I cannot express how excited I have been to embrace all of this over the first third of the season. It's been great, Landon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So we've talked to quite a few folks doing play-by-play or analysis for this new Apple TV deal, and they've all talked about like how good it is now, but most of them talking about how good they think it will be going forward as well, and their excitement about where it's going to go. But it has to be tough after so long of having more or less the same job to kind of break out of that shell, and instead of being there in New York most of the time, you're now traveling across the country half the time. What has that transition been like for you?
It's been exciting, and as you alluded to, it has been different. I think the whole dynamic changes, right? You're building relationships week in and week out for so long with the same coach and the same group of players, and now the dynamic changes where you're building trust with all of the coaches throughout the league. This week, I have the FC Dallas Austin game, as you're very well aware, and which is why you're having me on the show, I realize. And the truth is, I've only called one Austin FC game in my career prior to this. You probably remember the game. It was last year against the Red Bulls, who were lights out. They scored 4 times, and then by the end, Driussi was doing Driussi things, and the Red Bulls were holding on for dear life, and I think the final score of that game was 4-3. But now you're into that situation where every week it's a different challenge. You're speaking to as many people as you possibly can to try to gain institutional knowledge of the players that you might be covering for the first time in a long time. 2 weekends ago, I'll give you this example, was one of the most challenging times I've had since the Apple project started. MLS Season Pass needed me to do games on back-to-back nights, Saturday and a Sunday,
Oh, wow.
4 Western Conference teams, which I had not called yet this season. And as you're well aware, my long affiliation with the Red Bulls, I was most familiar with all of the teams in the East. That
Right.
doesn't mean I don't, tackle this the right way. But that's the kind of challenge that we're into now in this new, different day and age. And a lot of it has been very good. And one of the perks of this, I'm going to see Q2 for the first time this weekend. And you can only imagine how excited I am about that.
Oh, yeah. You're in for a treat. You're in for a treat. So one Western Conference team that I believe you called the Minnesota versus FC Dallas game a couple of weeks ago. Is that right?
Yes, I did. That was the Sunday night scoreless draw. Yep.
Yeah. So you've at least gotten to see Dallas here pretty recently. Austin only has one win over Dallas in this whole matchup. No other victories the whole time. So it's 3 losses to start off with in 2021. Then we had 2 draws in 2022 on the way to lifting the Copa Tejas. But then Austin was able to win the one that counted most, which was in the playoffs last year. Looking at this FC Dallas team this season, they're currently 5th place on 15 points. A lot of really high-level talent on this team. So you have Sebastian Lletget, Paxton Pomykal kind of running that midfield. And then the other night, it was Areola and Hunter Obrion starting against St. Louis. Areola comes off injured. Looks like it was maybe bad enough to keep him out for at least this weekend. Luckily, they have, what's his name? Alan Velasco coming back from an injury. Maybe he'll be able to step back in. But I think the other option, if they don't start Velasco, is bringing on Jesus Jimenez and playing Jesus Ferreira a little bit deeper as almost like a second striker, attacking midfielder. Having spent so much time covering Eastern Conference teams, what kind of player is Jesus Jimenez? And he played for Toronto last year, I believe. And what would FC Dallas look like with him and Ferreira on the field at the same time?
I think that the idea when they acquired Jimenez from Toronto, and this is someone who's not a young player, he's 29 years old, and he has a 9-goal season under his belt from Toronto last year. But when I spoke, and our crew spoke to Nico Estevez just 2 weeks ago when I was doing that game on Apple on the Sunday night, one of the things he thought that Jimenez could bring to the table was allow this team to play a little bit more directly. But we haven't seen an impact from the Spanish striker in that vein just yet. The truth is, this team right now is Jesus Ferreira, and I don't want to say very little else, but the whole machine is contingent on what Herrera is doing right now. And what we see with Ferreira on this club is 75% of the goals that the FC Dallas side is churning out, he's having a factor in right now. I think the last time I checked on this. It was 9 of the 12 goals that they've scored as a team this year. He has either scored directly or assisted on. To me, FC Dallas is most effective when Ferreira is kind of in that false 9 role. He drops back a bit, and that draws the attention of the center backs. And when the wings are on their game for FC Dallas, that's when I think they're at their best. But that's been a problem. You mentioned the injury to Paul Arriola. That will hurt this team. But the truth is, Arriola has not had the impact that they've wanted so far this year. He has only 2 assists on the season. He hasn't scored a goal yet. In the back of my mind, and in all fairness, I haven't spoken to Paul Arriola about this directly. I get the feeling that the snub from the United States World Cup team back in November still lives in the back of his mind. He is a strong-willed guy. He wants to make good for that. He doesn't believe it's over for him with the U.S. men's national team. He can likely play an important role for them as they go into the summer with Gold Cup and Nations League. But right now, something's not right with what is a very good player and an important player in the scheme of things for FC Dallas. I think it's been disappointing from an attacking vantage point from FC Dallas so far. You mentioned the scoreless draw that they played 2 weekends ago, and it was scoreless 50 minutes into the game that got abandoned on Saturday night. I think they want to make good for that, and the answers right now, Landon, seem to go through Jesus Ferreira and very little else, unfortunately.
Yeah, if they do end up playing he and Jimenez, so when Ferreira starts without Jimenez, he's been playing as that 9, but still dropping in quite a bit to kind of be that facilitator in the middle. And so with Jimenez in the game, that role maybe doesn't change too much for him. But one thing that maybe won't bring Austin FC fans any solace is that FC Dallas has scored quite a few goals at Q2 Stadium, and so we'll hope that we can keep that the somewhat lackluster offense going this season, but neither team really coming into this one at much of an advantage as far as rest or injuries go. Both teams playing US Open Cup midweek. We talked about Dallas's injuries. Austin also coming into this game with quite a few injuries. So a surprise player being left out of the roster this last weekend against Portland was Sebastian Driussi. He's out for an undetermined amount of time at this point, will almost certainly not be there this weekend. Diego Fagundes is probably still a week or 2 out from being back on the bench. Owen Wolff, we believe, this hasn't been officially announced, but we believe he's already left for U20 national team duty, so we'll be missing him. Good news is that Julio Cascante has returned, so I think a lot of fans are hoping that maybe with him back, Alex Ring can step up into the midfield to replace Owen Wolff there. But one of the other people that we were hoping maybe could do that is the new Serbian center back Radovanovic. He fell ill last week and didn't make the trip to Portland. And so there's a lot of, I think, potential puzzle pieces that Josh Wolff could plug in, but it's going to be curious with that Open Cup game and with this one coming up and all the injuries to see who's going to play in what game and what pieces he's going to put together all at once.
I think you're pointing to a big picture topic that affects a lot of teams in MLS, including Austin right now. Because I think if you take the team that you cover daily and weekly, if all the pieces are there, I think they fare well at this time of year where fixture congestion is an issue around the league. If you're telling me it's an Austin team with a healthy Driussi, with Fagundes ready, with Rigoni, with Zardes, with Bruin, with Redis, I think they're well equipped to navigate patches of the schedule like this. But unfortunately for most teams, including Austin, that's simply not the reality right now. I think that there's good in this team. I think they're better than their record has shown. And I do think that once Fagundes gets back and is playing regularly for this side, then I'll think truly we'll see what Austin maybe is not a mirror version of what they were last year when they exceeded all expectations, but I think they'll make their fan base proud, and I think they will make their fan base happy. The Owen Wolff thing, the timing of his departure for the Under-20 World Cup was something of a mystery to me, because I spoke to a couple of coaches around the league, and I still speak with the New York Red Bulls rather regularly. I know Daniel Edelman, who's a co-captain of that Under-20 team, has the green light to leave on Sunday, May 14th, after they play the New York Derby. Now, that's not universal for all players, and I understand it's a bit different for each club. I think that most of the Philadelphia contingent, there are 3 players on the Union going to that U20 side, got the green light to leave after Saturday. But if
after this last Saturday or next Saturday for Philly?
Well, May 14th,
the
which
14th,
would be the lead up. So if he's done, he's done. And again, I heard what Max Brados and Brian Dunseth said last week, and it sounded as if that was the case. I'm going to speak to Josh Wolff, I know, on Thursday, and I hope to get clarification on that then. Maybe the local media will have it before then. But you want a player who's coming off a 2-assist game, who had the primary play of the last result against Portland, involved in this game against FC Dallas. And if he's not there, that's obviously something that hurts Austin on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking a little bit off air. This is, or I guess you said it on air as well. This is going to be your first time calling a game at Q2 Stadium. We know, and you also talked about how you spent most of your career calling Eastern Conference games. And so is there anything that you're curious about Austin, either as a city or about the team, that maybe you'd want to get a little more insight on?
I've had friends that have moved to Austin from other pockets of the country, and I'm not saying this to get in the good graces of you or your audience. I am saying this because it's true. They've never been happier with such a move. I understand it's an exciting city, a cosmopolitan city, one with a buzz to it, one that was ready to embrace something like a first-year team in MLS when they did so 3 years ago. So that part of it, I'm really excited to witness for myself on Saturday night for this first time. The thing that I can't wait for is the visual in person. I've seen it on television so many times, and I don't want to make this out to be Austin FC football is something that I'm foreign to. Please don't perceive it that way, Landon, because I watched most TV, of your games last year, and I thought it was some of the most exciting stuff we've seen in the first 27, 28 years of MLS. So that part of it, I'm on board with. But the part of it that changes as I enter the equation as an announcer on Saturday night, and Danny Higginbotham, who's my regular partner, he and I talk about this all the time. You almost have to let go of what was last year and what is now, because the slate is clean every year. The challenges are different every year. The secret is out of Austin's strengths from last year. And Josh Wolff is a guy who probably woke up this morning, sees 2 coaches in Major League Soccer get the axe, and probably thinks, and don't view this through the prism of anything else other than me knowing that Josh is a good coach. He's going to be around a long time. But part of him in the back of his mind probably thinks, that 3-year extension I signed last year in May, that's probably a pretty good thing in my pocket right now. But he's going to come out of this because I think the talent will bear itself out, and Austin will display itself to be what it is. You can tell me, as somebody who's probably watched every minute of every game that this team has played so far this year, what's happening defensively with this team. I know how good Brad Stuver is. How about the group in front of him?
So Julio Cascante goes down game 1, and so Alex Ring has been starting at center back pretty much every game since then, and for the most part, has done a pretty good job. I have not really had that many complaints about our center backs. I know that we've given up probably more goals than we would have wanted to, but I think a lot of those you could probably fault. Most of them you could fault someone other than the center backs. Not all of them, but I do think that we looked like a much better team the other night, having Vicen and Cascante on the field at the same time. We've kind of been doing this thing before where they'd defend in a back 4 and then kind of rotate into a back 3 and push up one of the fullbacks as a winger. The other night against Portland, they just simplified it. Back three real center backs, if you're counting Alex Ring as a center back, but they were always a center back, no rotating in and out of that. And then 2 like true wing backs. And I think that settled the team a little bit. Also, when you have 2 guys that are taller than 5'8" playing center back, that helps a little bit as well. And so I do think that a lot of the struggles come a bit more from our midfield. Danny Pereira, as many gifts as he has, he's still learning to be a defensive midfielder. And
he's 22 years old, though. Yeah. I get that.
So honestly, yeah, I think it's a lot of things. I don't think I think the lazy answers say like, oh well, Cascante's been out, and so it's the center backs. It's like it really hasn't been the center backs. I think it's everything else that's been going wrong.
I want to see Gyasi Zardes play a role for this team because I still think he has something left in the tank at 31 years of age. I know he's trying to break the ice and get his first goal with this team. And I think once he gets it, that might open the door to some pretty good things. And I think that's something that's necessary for this team because, again, the number of games that are being played, I think you need something more than Driussi, Urruti, and Bruin. I think they need a tangible contribution from Gyasi Zardes, and this is a player who's very accomplished. I think he'll hit the 100-goal mark in his MLS career before all is said and done this year. And I'm excited to see what this group has for the balance of this season. The thing I think, and you can chime in on this, looking at it from 1,500 miles away last year, that Austin had going for it is that this is an underrated thing in MLS. When teams know what they are and what they are built around, and there were very few questions about what their attacking 3 were going to be. You knew what it was last year for this Austin side. That combination of Urruti and Driussi and Fagundes with a little bit of Ethan Finley sprinkled in, you knew what the bread and butter was. And I think once they get back to that, I think we'll start to see this team not just scrape by and find itself above the playoff line, but do so rather comfortably as we move along this season. I think there's too much talent here for your club to fail.
Yeah, I think getting back to who they were last year, but also I think one thing that got me a little bit excited in Portland is also knowing when to not be yourself and do, like, it's okay to do, like, if you have the ball with a 4-on-3 advantage, it's okay to break in transition and play fast, which is, I think we see the Austin team do the opposite of that too often. It's like, okay, we're a possession team, so we're going to slow down and get set up. It's like, no, you have the advantage, go. And so I think like balancing those things, getting back to who they were, and then also knowing when it's okay to be somebody else.
Yeah, I think adjustments are a very big thing in this sport, aren't they? And adjustments don't only have to be formation-wise, they could be a lot of things in real time. And I think you've pointed to a perfect example of that. Kind of the things that separate good teams from teams that are a little bit less. And I think they're into something good as we move forward this year.
All right. Well, as you said before, you're going to be on the call with Danny Higginbottom. This is, I believe, 7:30 kickoff. And I hope you enjoy your time in Austin, your time at Q2 Stadium.
I can't wait for it. Landon, thank you so much for having me as part of this.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. All right, we want to thank Steve one more time. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to come talk to us online, you can find me at LViajero87. Jeremiah is at jbentley_ATX. And then Kevin, where can folks find you?
I am at SoccerAlt on Twitter.
All right. We'd also encourage you to sign up for the Patreon. We did a little packing party today, me and Jeremiah and his oldest son. What took me most of a week last time, we knocked out in like 2.5 hours earlier today, which was excellent. So we'll be getting that stuff in the mail for anyone who has signed up already. That stuff is going to go out this week. And then for anybody else who signs up after that, we'll be kind of getting those out on a rolling basis. We'd also like to encourage you to visit the Stryker website, where you can get a 30% discount with the code MoonTower23. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week, where we will review the Open Cup game against New Mexico United, also review the FC Dallas game, and then we'll have 2 games to prep for, which are Seattle midweek, and then I can't remember what the weekend one is. Kevin, do you remember?
I don't.
It is Toronto at home, so another pretty big one coming up. But until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
And I'm Kevin Morris.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothings you never.
La gente. Oh my God.